and welcome back to Modeler Monday. Super happy to see you guys again. This is the 7th episode in the live stream series Modeler Mondays, every other Monday, unless scheduled otherwise at 1 p.m. EST. Modeler Mondays provides tips, tricks, tutorials, and an insight into professional and unique workflows when creating in both VR and on desktop in Adobe Substance 3D Modeler Beta. So as you may know, my name is Val. A lot of people know me as foxxr in the Discord community. I am the community manager for Adobe Substance 3D Modeler. And as somebody who needs no introduction because he's been all over Twitter for the last little bit, this is Nick Sharma. We've somehow managed to get him on the show. Hey, Nick, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Nick. You want to do a little background of myself? Sounds good? Or Yeah. So I've been working in the sportswear industry for about the past 7 years, and then recently joined Adobe about a year ago. So been working with companies like Adidas, Timberland, Vans, North Face, from both a designer on the footwear side and then also as a digital expert. So kind of helping bring some of those companies' skills up in the 3D space and also teaching the designers how to use 3D tools. And it's kind of what I'm doing at Adobe. So happy to kind of showcase a couple tips and tricks with Modeler.
He's low-key a big deal. And then we also have David Miller, who's on as a bit of a surprise guest. So David, you want to give a little bit of an intro to yourself?
Yeah. Hey guys, my name is David Miller. Some of you might know me online as Mellow Mograph. I've been doing 3D for about 10 years now, and currently I work at Wieden & Kennedy as a senior motion designer.
Super cool stuff. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on today, you guys. We're really excited to have you on to talk about 3D fashion, product design, that kind of stuff. David, you also have a background in product design, do you not?
A little bit, yeah. So I worked at Nike for about 4 years, and then at some other smaller agencies, I was doing a little bit of product-related stuff as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very cool. And so I'm super happy to have y'all on here to chat about product design, 3D fashion stuff. I understand that, Nick, you've got some stuff that you want to show us.
Yeah, so wanted to go through a couple of demos. So I'll have a quick backpack. We're going to model this in about 15, 20 minutes, and we're going to escalate that to some more challenging forms in terms of footwear and tackle how to kind of work around those with Modeler a little bit later. Should I just hop into the demo, or should we do a little quick showcase? What do you think would be the best way to kind of go from this, Val?
I would love to see, if you've actually got some physical stuff, you were more than welcome to or we can hop into Modeler in a little bit.
Yeah, so I can kind of, let me do back and forth a bit here. So in terms of footwear, so previously, again, working at companies like Adidas and Lululemon. So footwear is an interesting kind of challenge in terms of 3D modeling. People will always pretty much think of it okay, cool, shoe, I can model that pretty quickly. The biggest challenges, though, and it's something we're going to talk about in our session today, is that footwear is a asymmetrical, organic, and hard surface form with super thin surfaces. Especially with Modeler, the thin surfaces is going to be a big talking point that we're going to talk about today. Because if you take a look at the inside of a shoe, one of them that you see here, the profiles that you're going to deal with are paper thin, if not smaller than paper. And usually there's multiple materials within the liner of those forms. So trying to model those is a bit tricky, especially because with Modeler being a voxel-based program, the thinner your surfaces get, you'll have issues where some of those areas might clip through, and you might see those holes that you would find in those models. So I'm going to talk about a couple of ways to work around that, a couple of solutions that you might have if you're trying to deal with something similar to that, even if you're doing automotive modeling or something similar to that. We might be dealing with thin surface panels. In terms of kind of some other 3D models that I've kind of done, we're going to talk about how to bring some of these assets in, import them, and kind of getting ready for other apps like Painter to kind of apply some finished materials onto those forms a little bit later on. But hopping in first, so I want to start off a little simpler before we hop into the shoe. So we're going to model out this backpack here, which is a great starting point in terms of talking about thin surfaces. Because again, we have the flaps of the backpack, we have some side pouches that we can model out first here. But what I like about this model and what we're going to demo here is that the workflow that I've been kind of finding myself doing in Modeler is a little bit of actually both desktop and VR. So hopping kind of like this hybrid setup. So I'm not stuck in, or I'm not setting myself up for just desktop mode or VR mode and kind of bouncing between the two where I need be. So I'm just going to move this off to the side here. And I'm going to start modeling off a new backpack. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure my symmetry mode is turned on because I want to model this out symmetrically for the most part here. And I'm going to block out the shape of my bag here. And then, yeah, if David and Val, if there's any questions, let me know because I'll probably be in the middle of like modeling mode.
Yeah.
And just...
We got you. Sure thing.
Cool.
And so, quick question for me. Do you typically start your blockouts in desktop versus VR? Like, is there a reason in which you would choose one or the other? Or?
Yeah, so one of the things, especially in my head, like I've done both product design, industrial design, and more like freelance, more creative, like illustration-based work. And so it's a little bit of fighting both those sides. Like, how much creativity do I want to get into versus like what is actually realistic if I'm trying to make a bag or a backpack. So the reason why I want to stick in desktop mode is I'm trying to block out the overall shapes, proportion, and forms in like a 90-degree kind of grid. Because when you second get into VR, like everything kind of gets off kilter. Some of the angles get messed up and I have to go back and tweak them later. So I'm making sure everything's like perfectly 90-degree for especially for the blockout. Then I can go in and start to add in those imperfections for like the softer forms a little bit later in VR.
Okay.
Yeah, VR is great for doing a lot of organic stuff.
So yeah, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to block out the major forms of the bag here. So I'm using the taper mode. I'm just kind of copying the same shape over again for the kind of front pouch, the main body of the bag, this front pouch here. I'm just going to use that same kind of blocky shape for the most part at the start here. And then we can make modifications to that a little bit later. So having the symmetry mode turned on is nice because, again, like I'm going to keep the same shape as much as possible here. And also, I think the streaming is blocking the reset button. Let's see if I can touch that without stopping sharing. Maybe not. I think the stop sharing is like hovering right above that button, so we'll just kind of work with it without it. Yeah, I was I had like 2 pixels to be like, all right, just want to reset it. Okay. What I was trying to do is basically there's a reset button down here. I think actually on stream you can see it where it stops sharing. It's right there, but it should orient it so it's a perfectly 90-degree angle. So I'll just kind of keep it as close as I can possible here.
You might be able to hide that button, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's a
yeah. There you go. Perfect.
Hey.
So
thank you, Brent.
And what I'm going to do, especially for these, as I'm starting to deal with the straps of the bag, because these are going to be thinner profile, is I'm going to kind of like eyeball it a bit because I want to give a little bit of extra clearance at the top and the bottom for that strap. So as I start to warp and deform it, I can kind of do it in one singular motion. If I try to warp and deform thin surfaces multiple times in Modeler, the more I kind of maneuver, fuss with the small surfaces, the higher chance I'm going to have holes in the model itself. So whenever I'm trying to deal with thin surfaces, I'll try to do it in 1 or 2 quick motions, and that's going to give me much smoother, solid geometry, ideally, in the most part. So the straps for this bag is looking a little bit taller than what the main body of it is, but I'm doing that knowing that I'm going to kind of pull these forms out. I'm going to just kind of tuck these straps in a little bit later. So we'll tuck those in, and then let's do the main kind of flap for the bag itself. I'm also making a new layer each time, and that's just so as I'm modeling a little bit later, I can kind of work on each piece in isolation, and I don't have to worry about trying to grab like the bag and the flap of the bag and other components separately each time. I know that each piece or each geometry will be separate, so I can make changes if I need to. That's a little bit long. I can make changes if I need to without having to modify all the geometry at the same time.
Right. So when you're working on these kinds of forms and shapes, like in industry, do you get like some kind of a concept art that you typically work off of first, or do people typically come in and create just directly in 3D? Like, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it actually depends on what stage you're in. So my experience in footwear, there's a few different categories. So there's what's called inline. So it's kind of projects a year to 3 years out. And that's going to be the shoes that you see if you see like your Adidas shoe, and it's like the Adidas Audi 08. Like that means it's the 8th version of that shoe line.
Okay. Right.
So inline deals with like those incremental updates, and that's usually about 3 years out. That group pretty much has like a standard of like what they're going to be working with. There's some deviations and there's going to be updates at the years, but they kind of know new layer. They know kind of what they're working with, how to make. They're not going to be massive changes each year. It's going to be small incremental updates. Then you get to groups like advanced kind of creation. So those groups can maybe like 3 to 5 years out. That's when you get to play with concepting a little bit more. So you get to play with new tools. That's when you get modeler in. Maybe they're kind of like dabbling in stuff like Houdini or Grasshopper to kind of generate out unique outsole patterns for the shoes. And for those who are not kind of aware what outsole is, it's at the rubber of your shoe itself. So this outsole pattern, especially if you see those really crazy shapes and geometry, they're probably using a computational program like Houdini or Grasshopper to make that. And then beyond like an advanced concept group, you have innovation groups. So those groups, and that's kind of where I was at Adidas, they're looking like 7 years out. So that's like a marriage between new technology, manufacturing and design process and materials. So like getting all those groups together to kind of work on what the future could be, right. Especially when you see like, it's kind of like the concept car kind of projects for the shoe world. If you see like the craziest concepts from the big companies, it's probably those innovation groups.
Oh, that's so cool.
Cool. So I'll kind of add in the smaller details now, kind of going a little bit back and forth here. But once I have a good enough block out here, and you can kind of see the foundations for what this bag would be. Now, this would be a part where I'll hop into VR, kind of put these pieces kind of roughly where I want to be before going back to desktop mode to add in the details like the liner here. So let me throw my headset on. Do this. Oh, and turn the audio down. So there we go.
Yeah, and for those who are, I guess, new to seeing Substance 3D Modeler, when you put your headset on, it just automatically ports you back and forth between desktop and headset. Do you find that a jarring experience for you at all, Nick?
So I actually got a VR headset in 2017. So I've been used to VR for quite a while, so it's like not even it doesn't even faze me at this point anymore. It definitely did, and I actually teach classes, especially for like at a college level. Right. And so I'll tell everybody there, it's like, hey, after about 40 minutes or so, take a break, because if you're new to VR itself, it can give you migraines. So yeah, at the start I definitely did, but now it's not a problem at all.
That might explain some things for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, David, you work in VR a fair bit as well too, hey?
When I'm in Modeler, I almost work in it exclusively in VR. It's just super fun to be in there, yeah.
Yeah, oh, that's cool. How long do you spend in VR then, like typically?
Oh gosh, should I say? I don't want to embarrass myself. It's more than a couple hours.
Oh no.
I take breaks, obviously.
Oh, that's good.
But yeah, I just, like a lot of the stuff that I do is very like cartoony character type stuff in Modeler, so just jumping straight into VR mode works the best for me.
Yeah. For those who want to see David's work, he's actually doing a Adobe Max talk later on this month. What month is that?
Next month.
Oh, it's next month. Yeah. So we'll definitely be able to share the details around that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we see that Nick is moving some flaps around. It's actually really interesting to watch, because I never thought that you would move flaps downward like that, but I guess it gives like a nice organic kind of a feel to it.
Yeah, so what's interesting too when modeling out soft goods in particular, so like when I say soft goods, I mean stuff like backpacks, shoes, apparel. One of the things I see a lot, especially with students, is that if you model it in a program like Rhino, for example, like a CAD program, it looks very stiff and it doesn't look real. It looks like a 3D, like it looks like a 3D model. The biggest thing with soft goods is that it's never perfect. Like there's imperfections throughout, which is nice in Modeler because you can get those naturally. And at some point I'd break symmetry and kind of like warp the surfaces a little bit just so they feel a little bit, softer, more malleable, and slightly imperfect. And it's a little bit counterintuitive, but that imperfection actually makes your renders at the end look photoreal. If they're super stiff and rigid, it looks like a 3D model. It looks something's off and fake. So it's like something to see commonly here. So this is kind of one of those areas I was mentioning before where it's a tricky balance. So the tool I'm using right now is the elastic tool. And the elastic tool, for the most part, can hold the shape a bit better instead of the warp tool. The warp tool kind of thins out profiles a little bit more. But in this case here, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take this strap, and you can kind of see on this backpack here, and warp it to the front. When I was trying to take the end here and stretch it all the way down here, that movement or that warp is fairly aggressive because there's a pretty long distance between the end here and the end of that bag. So when I was trying to, get that. Maybe I just want to.
One thing I noticed too, sorry to interrupt, is that when I have symmetry on, it almost doubles the effect of whatever modifier you're using. So if you're not too concerned about like a symmetrical bend down like that, then you might just want to turn symmetry off for a second and then apply that bend. See if that works.
Let me give that a shot. Because what is I'll give that a shot too. That's actually a really good point, David. But the shorter the distance when you're trying to do a warp or deform, the better chance that you have to keep that geometry intact. Because now we can kind of see, like, I'm still getting a little bit of thinness on my profiles there, but it's not nearly as bad as when I was trying to warp the stretch all the way down from further away. So this is much more workable on this point in time here.
Okay. And so we do have a question from the chat. And so it says, Modeler seems really procedural. Do you ever have to worry about deleting history or not being able to go back like in other DCCs? I know that you were talking a little bit about that, Nick, earlier around like the strengths of Modeler versus like what it's like to work in like CAD and other digital content creation tools.
Yeah, so and you'll actually see it a little bit more in the next scene. I have two little quick scenes to show everybody. But the way I work in Modeler is I'll actually, once I have something that I like let's say like the flapless bag is nice, or like the body I'm really happy with, I'll take those out, duplicate them, and put them off to the side to reference later. So it's kind of like, if you're familiar with the term kit bashing, it's from the entertainment industry, but it's like taking multiple pieces together, or multiple pieces, and then putting them together later on. Because if I'm working on this bag and I get too far into it, at some point it's like I need to go back. Like maybe I was happy with this stage compared to that stage. It's trying to undo as much as you can, but if you open up the program or if you save it, close out the program, you're gonna lose that undo history. So that's why once I'm at a place where I'm happy with some of the forms, I'll duplicate it, put it off to the side, and have that saved as a backup, like a reference copy. Hopefully that answered the question.
I think so, yeah. It really covers a lot of like what we're seeing in terms of, and I know that this is something that we always bond over as like 3D professionals, where it's like, oh yeah, we've all gone through the brutal like poly modeling, like where are your vertices? Do you have holes in your mesh, right? But it's cool to see you working here in like Modeler and being able to use your tools in a more versatile way and not really have to worry about some of the background stuff that happens there. Like you're really able to approach it as an artist as opposed to like a technical professional and like trying to hack it.
Especially when concepting, that's one of my favorite parts is like, I don't need to worry about like, all right, is this polygon, like which polygon is this? Where is the edge? Where's the point? Because like doing that micromanaging is a pain. So having the ability to be like, all right, I'm just going to kind of add these here, fuse them together. I know because of voxel based, it's going to be fused and it's going to be a solid form. I don't have to worry about the topology as much.
Right.
So kind of like a little bit of that process. So I had those forms blocked out, and then I popped my headset on and kind of morphed them into place. So now I can kind of go back into desktop mode, and the way I'm going to work with this backpack is block out some of those details, so like the little bit of that liner where like the leather might roll around. I'm on those edges there. I'll kind of make some of those, and then kind of just do that back and forth. So I'll make like 1 or 2 pieces, and then we'll hop on to that next scene.
So one thing you guys might have noticed is that there's 2 different kinds of warp tools that Nick was using, and he was primarily using the elastic warp tool. And I personally prefer the elastic warp tool. It's a lot more like volume preserving. It's good for like if you want to like stretch something a little bit more organically. Like if you were to take something like gum and just like stretch it, it actually creates those nice little tension points in the middle. So that's my tool of choice when it comes to warping. But you can do both either way.
Yeah, the warp tool, like I go back and forth. So exactly what Dave was saying is like when I'm trying to make aggressive changes to a large shape, I'll use the elastic tool. When I want to actually take a surface and actually make it thinner, then I'll switch to the warp tool. Because with the warp tool, I can kind of push surfaces and kind of make profiles a little bit thinner, which you'll see in the shoe demo. So yeah, I'll kind of go back and forth between the 2 because exactly what Dave was saying there. So yeah, what I'm going to do here is, so you can see I'm blocking this out again, like the where the rubber, or sorry, where that leather is going to roll up on that bag here, like these kind of thinner profile shapes. That's what I'm blocking out right now. So I'm going to model that, but as I'm doing that, I'm going to talk about importing in assets, because some of these shapes and geometries, like they could be a little bit more time consuming to model in Modeler. But something that's as simple as like a buckle or a strap, those are pretty common models. And so these models you can find pretty much everywhere online. What's nice is that a lot of these basic assets are on the Substance asset website. So you can download them from the asset website and bring those in. And that's actually exactly where I found this kind of chain form and this buckle. So if I wanted to bring those in and add in a little bit more detail without having to model that in, I can go through, and these ones are downloaded assets here from the Substance site. So I have what is it? Curve chain. Let's do the auto lock. I think that's the little side zipper here. So I can bring those into the scene. Let's see where those imported to. They might have imported right into the middle and the center of the scene here. So I'm just going to select everything really quickly. Move this off to the side. Piece. Yeah, they're hiding right there. So instead of trying to model out something like a chain or a buckle or like these kind of ends of the chain here, you can just download them from a website or the Substance website. I can right click and then convert these to clay assets. And then all the tools I've been using in Modeler up to this point, I can now affect these new assets here that I've imported from a different program or website.
Oh, nice. So it saves you some time too during your product design, product modeling.
Exactly. Yeah. Because one of the things with product design too is when you're dealing with, this gets into like all the how stuff is made kind of talk. But when you're dealing with product design, like a lot of the components that you're going to see are the same. So like you might have like 5 different backpacks, but using like the same zipper little buckle. And that's just because like if the buckle out works, there's no need to rebuild it for each backpack, especially, if there's 5,000 different backpacks on there.
Yeah.
So some of those buckles or zippers, I'll just like keep those in the back and be like, I just need to grab that buckle, put it right into my project. No problem.
That's pretty good. So like in half an hour of stream, you've pretty much made like a full backpack.
Yeah, and like I can go through and like model out and kind of like refine that here. And I think that original backpack, heads down working took me about 30 minutes to model out. You can kind of see like how quickly some of this can be done. I'm just erasing that because the file has all those buckles in the same file. I didn't need those other ones. Just wanted this one on the side here, so I can bring that in, maybe size it a little bit, rotate it into position.
So Nick, as you've been using Modeler, what have you found your favorite tool to be?
personally, I really love the warp tools. Warp tool's been super nice. I use the link tool every once in a while. So we can kind of talk about that. Like it lets you kind of, if you make clones of objects, it lets you link them together. So if you change one object, it changes everything all at the same time. So it's just especially that tool. Like I don't think there's like the cloner option in Cinema 4D is kind of similar to it, but there's not like a live updating as much as you can kind of have a modeler here.
Yeah, no, I love using the link tool. It's great to create like little details and just kind of clone them all over the place, and then you can just take one and update it, and the updates apply to all the other clones. So like if you're making like a donut, for example, and you have one, you like put the frosting and the sprinkles on it, all you have to do is just like make multiple clones. Then you can do like a stack of, I don't know, 18 donuts or something like that. And then you have like a full scene.
Yeah, that's incredible. Sorry, I was just thinking about like the typical, the classic donut 3D tutorial.
Yeah, exactly. Donuts are a prominent thing in 3D culture.
They really are, yeah.
I think pretty much every demo, if you go on YouTube, you'll find like a donut demo somewhere.
At least one. I feel like we should do that too.
The modeler donut. I feel like that needs, David, I feel like you need to take that on.
the Substance Modeler Donut Challenge.
It's your destiny to make the Substance donut.
I like it. We do also have another question around like what does it feel like to work in VR while sculpting? I know we touched upon this like earlier on, but like when it comes to what you're actually doing now, Nick, do you feel like being in VR actually helps you place things better, or is it like just more fun in general, or like is there like any real benefit?
It's both. So it's something that's hard to explain without having, the second I put this headset on somebody and be like, all right, it's a sculptor kind of sketch or whatever they want to do, everything sort of clicks. So it's a hard thing to explain without having the experience. But what I like to benefit from is you get a better sense of proportion, scale, and placement of things when you're in VR. Because when you're in desktop, it's like a kind of a linear kind of like, all right, I'm seeing something on a screen, but being able to like rotate, get up close to it, and because it's like life size and you're able to mold things with your hands, I get a better sense of like where things are at, how things connect together, and what modifications I want to do, to the object in VR versus on desktop. Right. And it's a hard thing to explain without having you be in the headset to try it out.
Yeah, for those who are going to Adobe Max, I heard that there might be workshops in which you can actually try VR there.
I think there's a few.
Yeah, so that would be cool.
Come to Max.
Come to Max, yeah. For those who are interested, we'll put some links in at the end so you guys know what we're talking about in terms of like events that are coming up and what you can see. And for those who are interested in 3D Modeler, there is a Discord community where we do share lots of tips, tricks, and tutorials, and you can access a lot of the resources and beta type stuff, so you can give it a shot on your own if you would like to see and try and import your own models.
Cool. So I can go through and I can finish up the model, but I think for like the most part, you can kind of see like that process overall for this backpack. And what I would do to kind of finish this up to see this back here, some of these shapes like this flap for like the liner for it. Oops, I want to make a new layer. I want to duplicate it. I would just duplicate a layer like this and then nudge it over and maybe shrink it down a little bit and then take the warp tool. And that's where some of those imperfections I was talking about, like the soft goods, I think the warp tool, elastic tool, and kind of like tweak these surfaces ever so slightly with symmetry turned off, so it feels a little bit more natural. So that's kind of how I would model the bag here. And again, like all the side pouches, again, like the same type of process. I'd make a thin surface, use the elastic tool and warp in position. The zipper and the buckle here, imported those in. But I wanted to move on to a more complicated object. So talking about those shoes, for instance. And talk about some of the challenges and workarounds when dealing with more complex soft good type forms here.
Sounds good. Let's go.
Okay.
You know it's good when you get the Windows update sounds alongside your model.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't like update and be like, oh, we gotta update and reinstart Windows right in the middle of your demo.
I love that. Yeah.
It's happened.
Update starting, shutting down in 5 minutes.
The panic sweat is like, oh, I gotta finish this in 5 minutes. Let's do it.
Yeah, right.
So
here we can talk about how quick Modeler is.
So, we saw the bag here. And the bag is what's nice about it. For the most part, bags are symmetrical objects, so I can work with the mirror tool turned on for the most part. And because they're all made out of this, usually the same material, like you have your nylon, canvas, leather, for instance, they're all malleable, softer shapes. The biggest thing with footwear, though, is you have asymmetrical forms. So if you ever even if you take a shoe off or go into your closet and grab one of your shoes, you can kind of look that your left shoe and your right shoe are angled differently. You have those asymmetrical forms. The sole of the shoe, so the midsole, the outsole, and the toolings, those are hard surface elements. So that's a different modeling technique. If you wanted to, you might think about for consumer electronics, like robots, for instance, you do that same modeling technique for the hard surface elements. And then you have the thin surfaces, like I was mentioning. On top of all of that, shoes and fashion are kind of one-on-one. So people are trying to push the boundaries of what can be made. So you have really complex, crazy shapes that are coming out of the highest end, fashion houses. So putting those all together, you actually get really tricky, weird ways to model footwear that you probably wouldn't expect. So some of the things I was talking about, if I wanted to make this, right? So this would be the upper portion here. It's actually really hard to take one surface and kind of stretch that out throughout the entire form of the shoe here. So there's a couple ways to work around that. And you kind of see one of them I'm going to demo right here is, let's say I wanted to kind of create this really organic, thin surfaced kind of profile for that here. Maybe it's some sort of cool liquid inspired sandal design here. So that would be really challenging to make sure all the surfaces stay thin throughout the entire time. And you keep warping them, and the more you warp it, the more holes you get throughout that model. But one thing that you can do in Modeler is you can bring in imported assets. And this form right up here, so these are some of the other assets that I've had from what's called tooling. So these are the components that are making up the shoe here. This top one, though, is what's called a last, and actually is what I'm holding in my hands here. So the last, if you're unfamiliar with it, what this is the manufacturing kind of tool for your shoe. So what they do when they're building out shoes is that they'll have the upper, so all the fabric of your shoe laid out flat. They'll stretch the upper over this last, so the kind of fabric is sitting on the last like this. And they'll take the sole, which is all the foam and the rubber, and then adhere that to the bottom of it, and then pull the last out. And then your final shoe is made there. The reason why I have it in my scene is because when you're designing or creating footwear, you have to reference your last at some point in time, because that's how it's actually going to be manufactured. Because if you create this really abstract, organic footwear concept, there's no way to manufacture that unless you're 3D printing, which is extraordinarily expensive. There's no way to make that. So that's why the form is here. So it got way deep into the footwear.
No, it's good. That's really cool, actually. At what point in time would you learn about that, that kind of level of detail, especially when we're seeing lots of interesting cases in which you've got 3D shoes, you've got Fortnite, and they're all starting to manufacture their own kind of wear. So it's interesting to see where you're actually going and how that works in a real life scenario. Yeah,
there's the footwear is interesting where it's all right, you see your standard shoes, but yeah, exactly the point. There's stuff like Fortnite. Do you mind if I pull up one of the fashion houses to kind of show some of the crazier examples? Might be
yeah, do it up.
Here.
Woo!
So one of these, there's a fashion house called Ballman, and their footwear designs are a little crazy. And this is what makes footwear a really interesting kind of field to be in right now, because some of the shapes and the forms you can make now that kind of what I was saying before with manufacturing, stuff like this 10 years ago would be near impossible. But now with manufacturing updates that are out there, like you can, I mean, over $1,000, but you can buy it. So stuff like this is possible. So when you're like, oh, there's no way like this crazy organic shoe could ever be made, it's like, yeah, it can now. It's just how much are you going to spend?
Wow. At what point does it become like less like a shoe and more like a building or something? Yeah.
There's a whole, especially it's why I kind of fell in love with it in the first place. Like you can go crazy performance. Like the groups making stuff for the Olympics are like, all right, like the sole should be like 0.5 millimeter thin, and the form's got to be, you know, exact to spec. And then you have stuff like this where it's like, let's just push what we can do and see what happens.
That's so cool.
So it's a fun industry to be in. Going back to Modeler though, so that kind of shape form here, knowing that I can use this and kind of reference this in my design here, I can take advantage of booleans within Modeler. So I'll have the base form here. I'm going to make a duplicate of it. And you'll see like I have like a couple of them already. So I always, whenever I'm going to be working on something, I'll leave these ones alone. Like I don't want to touch these. I want to make sure that I can always go back to a starting point if I need to.
Right. Okay.
What I was kind of mentioning with the bag there. So with the booleans here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint this one here. And actually, I'm going to lower the resolution of this a couple times.
We don't actually see people use color a lot when they 3D model, so it's really cool to see that you're actually using it in like a functional way.
Yeah, and the reason why is so when I'm booleaning, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to overlap these two lasts for the most part.
Yeah.
And what I was saying before is like it's really hard to get these thin surfaces with like just the basic clay brush. But knowing that I can boolean it, what I'm going to do is I know these two shapes are 1-to-1, except one's just a little bit smaller because it's kind of tucked away in here because I sized it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw my headset back on, and wherever I want like stuff to reveal, I'm just going to like pull the. This might be a better showcase demo than kind of talking it through here. So
yeah, do it up.
Oh, there we go. So let's say I wanted to cut a hole in the top of my form here. And I'm just going to be really fast and kind of loose with this. Depending on how clean you wanted this to be, take a little bit more time if you need to. But maybe I want like a hole here, because maybe I'm trying to do like that sandal concept before.
Oh, that's cool. You're not going to make the croc boots? Have you guys seen those recently?
I might do that. I'm trying to like how, I guess like, yeah, we did get like, I guess actually this would be the croc boot if I just kept that like this. We'll just do some like weird, organic,
amazing
shaped forms there.
I'm sorry for what people
stamp in the holes of the shoe.
Yeah.
We'll just, and this is kind of, this is where I was mentioning before, like take advantage of the program, right? Because you could struggle and you can fight to be like, oh, I need to make sure this is 1 millimeter thick, right? And, with any 3D program, like sometimes you got to use multiple of them, right? But what I like about this is like, all right, what if I want to do some crazy organic sculptures, kind of like that Ballman shoe that you were seeing there? So I can take this boolean process, what you're seeing, and you'll see it in just a moment here. But what I did is I had that other secondary last inside this one, and I'm pulling forms through because everything in white, once I boolean this, is what's going to remain. So I'm going to select this component here. Actually, I want to do it that way. I'm going to hit the edit kind of mode or action mode. And then down here, if we hit the this little box in the box icon, and the bottom left-hand corner is the Boolean subtract mode. And if I hit apply and let it think for a bit and move this one out, what remains is that internal kind of shape in that form there. So all that surfacing that would have been really hard to do with just the base clay brush I'm able to get just by taking 2 last step. And yeah, this looks really weird, but I don't need it anymore, so I can delete that.
Oh, that's really interesting. And so, like, is there any way that you typically would check for holes or any like weirdness in your mesh at this point? Or, I mean, like, obviously there's holes in that shoe, but
yeah. So some of it too, right? Like if I was trying to make something like this, and I can actually demo, if I was just using the regular clay brush, for instance. Let me back out here and go to clay mode. So let's say I was trying to make this kind of component here normally. So I'd get like a square shape. I can lay that down. And if I try to warp it too many times to kind of fit in a position, one, the surface will start to like get all these like little wrinkles, like little kind of mounds that I have to go through and smooth out later.
Right.
And then 2, you can kind of see it on the edges here, and it's still with the other model, but the surfaces will start to like deform and start to make small holes and crevices the more I warp this and try to fit it into position.
I've got a question from Fry Pixels. He asks, would you create a secondary group to keep the original since it clears the bool objects? It really is kind of a case-by-case thing. So if you only needed to make that central shape, then yeah, you can just like clear it and then just have that remaining. But if you wanted to make multiple parts like Nick might want to do for his project, then saving an original is a good idea.
Yeah, again, like that's why I always have, like, once I have like a shape that I'm happy with, whether it been that bool shape before, whether it's this form here, I always, make a backup, and I'll kind of like leave it somewhere in my scene. So I have like those. I'm like, all right, those are perfect. I don't want to touch them. I want to make sure I have that reference, and I'll just kind of leave those back there. So the one tricky thing is, right, it's like some of these edges here, you can kind of see like they're frayed a little bit, and that's just a natural kind of thing with how the voxel system works. So the benefit of voxel is like I get to take these shapes. I don't have to worry about topology. I get to fuse things together. But sometimes when dealing with really sharp, really thin edges, you'll still get imperfections. And what I found is like there's a time and the time and place where like I can keep fighting this and keep trying to smooth this out. But I'm going to take advantage of what Modeler has and then create those really complex, interesting forms. And then I can take it into something else if I want to, and then get those like really fine cleanup done elsewhere. Because when you're dealing with product design, it's hard. It is really hard to get like super thin, precise, like machined out forms sometimes.
Yeah. And do you find that when you're working in Modeler, going between like VR headsets and desktop, that you're seeing like any weirdness regarding perspective? So like if you are working with your model in virtual reality, you're seeing it a certain way with like a dynamic perspective, and you move back to desktop to like re-export those models, do you see that there's any difference, or are they pretty much the same?
It is exactly what I'm having an issue with right now, or like not an issue, but like what I'm working with right now. So why?
Yes, you're having issues.
Yeah. No, it's good.
Everything is perfect.
Welcome to the beta. Yeah.
So you might have seen the other like Model Mondays or other workshop sessions that they were working kind of within just this background environment. So for myself, the reason why I made this kind of base plate here, it's kind of like just basically a yoga mat, basically, yeah. Is so I know when I'm trying to line something up here that this is perfectly like flat. Like it should be like a 90 degree, it's rounded edges, but it's a 90 degree kind of form. It's not at an axis, it's not tilted. When I'm working in VR, that's kind of what I mentioned with the backpack and why I was working in desktop mode first, is I want to make sure as much as possible that my forms are, 90 degree. Like if I try to model this and those shoes like that, everything's going to be awkwardly off kilter, awkwardly positioned. And for entertainment, like concept stuff, like that might be fine. But when you're dealing with something that needs to be, machined out, like I can't build if I try to put this on your foot, like you would absolutely hate that. So my alarm's going off for something else. There you go.
Are the cookies done?
Cookies are not done.
What about the donuts?
Donuts, absolutely. Donuts are always done. Yeah, I can kind of quickly model this out. So I'll try to model something what you're saying there. Yeah, like I would, once I had, it kind of roughed out. Again, like I took the sole, previously I'm using that as the base form here. Warping it sometimes, if there's a little bit of delay, I might lower the resolution just so it's easier to warp things into place. Because otherwise you kind of see there it's thinking a little bit because the resolution's a little bit too high. So that might be time for me to, good indication for me to lower the resolution down just a bit so I can warp a little bit quicker. Same with this, it's a little bit large.
Looks like you're just building like layers on top of layers. Do you ever like find yourself linking layers at all?
It's for specific components of it. So yeah, so if you have boots, on the bottom of your boots, like those forms that kind of stick out the bottom of your shoe, those are called lugs. And for something like that, that's when I'll link layers and kind of have everything linked and live, so I can make modifications to everything really quickly. For the most part, when dealing with like the upper here or like the tooling, like they're all unique kind of components. So I don't really link them too much myself, just because like I know that they're going to be edited and modified pretty drastically. So I kind of leave everything separate.
Okay, that makes sense. And also, just so you are aware, Nick, you have 9 minutes until end of stream, so we will be wrapping up pretty quick here.
Yeah, and and I can kind of answer if there's any other Q&A. I think that'd be perfect here because I can kind of like modify there, but. You can kind of see.
You guys take a look in the chat and see if there's any questions we missed over.
Yeah.
Garrett A is asking, will we get VR support for the index?
Oh, that is coming up from what I can hear. I know that the team is working on like OpenXR stuff. For now, we are on Oculus Quest 2, so those who are interested in joining the beta can use that. But for Index, we will be looking at that in future. I know that there are a couple of people who are also using non-Quest headsets. And if you want to, we can actually link you to some of the resources that we have in the community. And we can see if we can like Jimmy rig something together, but it's not official yet.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. Are you doing anything else for questions? I think we pretty much got some. We got some. David, you're very popular.
Some folks wanting to see some character modeling happening. But
oh yeah, you want to model a duck into your shoe there, Nick? Satisfy the masses.
Exactly.
Just joking. It's really cool though to be able to see like your workflow and how you actually approach using Modeler in a more product design type way. And I know that a lot of people who do use Modeler are very like character designy, or they're creating like organic sculptures, etc. So it's interesting to see something that is so traditionally used in CAD modeling actually move to a more like conceptual, like artsy type based software.
Yeah, and for reference, like all these options here, like especially the sole, right, bottom of your shoe. Mm-hmm. If I was to model this, before, I would be using programs like Rhino, AutoCAD, like the heavy duty, hardcore like CAD software, like SolidWorks even. I've been using SolidWorks Mix too.
Oh wow!
So the fact that I can kind of like ideate and kind of sculpt and kind of break out the forms here, it's so much nicer than dealing with a CAD program. I don't know if anybody's hopped into SolidWorks, but if you go from something like Modeler or ZBrush something into SolidWorks, you're going to hate it. It is not the pathway to go. Yep. But it's so much fun to kind of ideate without some of those restrictions or boundaries.
Oh, we do have one last question from Style Isle. Great name. How would you incorporate more geometric shapes like squares into your designs versus these organic versions? So if you're doing more like inorganic shapes, I'd imagine.
Yeah, so that's kind of was moving to a bit here. So let's say I was going to ideate something on the sole of my shoe, right? So like the bottom texture that you might see. Mm-hmm. So what I would do, like let's say I wanted some like linear kind of patterns, maybe there's like something more geometric based off that.
Right.
So what I could do is I could kind of place a form down, and I can use my warp tool. And then maybe I'll make just like a slight kind of variation to that. So maybe there's like a curve there. Maybe something, maybe we kind of use the eraser tool here. And we just kind of like give it some, cuts into that form. So I have this like fairly, not again, like I warped it a little bit, but pretty much the same. Like not too much, not too heavily modified, just geometry there. But I want to copy it and move it down this path here. So I could select that object. I can use that make link function, and then I can duplicate this kind of through. I'll show you here. Again, to kind of go through, and I'll have to unlink it a little bit later. But I'll just keep those there for now. And what's nice is that, let's say I wanted to make a drastic change to this traction pattern. Because these are all linked, if I make a small change to one of them, you can kind of see all of them are being updated at the same time. So that's nice for geometric patterns too, because if I want to make like a more rigid geometric design, if I cut into it and just make like a solid cutout, everything's linked in real time. So instantly I went from like something that's wavy and organic to something that's like maybe harder edged, sharper looking. So maybe I kind of like give it a chisel here, and I can give it that sharper, more geometric look to that model. I think I have to do a little bit of work to kind of clean this up a bit, but the fact that I can kind of like make that sharp cut is super fast.
Always interesting to see like link geometry being altered in real time because it like moves through all of them.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And like I was saying before, like they weren't lined up before, but then I can just kind of go through and grab each set and just like nudge it in place where I need to. But yeah,
also some great like steady tools and like lazy options for those who have kind of shaky hands, like me.
Yeah. No, I definitely have like the shaky hand, especially after like 2 or 3 cups of coffee in the morning, kind of thing.
Coffee modeler.
Coffee modeler. They should have like a coffee mode enabled where everything is steady afterward.
Yeah, automatically steady.
Yeah.
Yeah,
automatically smooth.
The last for like the other hard surface stuff, that's where I kind of like what I was doing with the backpack early on. Like I take the headset off, and then because I'm in the desktop mode, I can know a little bit more precisely where angles are at, and everything's a little bit more rigid in terms of movements. So I can get some of those hard surface shapes a little better in desktop.
Right. All right, excellent. Yeah, and that is all the time that we have today, folks. It was such a pleasure to have you two on today. Just great conversation, and also like super cool to be able to see the process and everything that happens when it comes to like more fine-tuned modeling, especially when it comes to 3D modeler. I know that that's something that people are interested in, but also like not quite sure how they would be able to execute upon that if that was the case, Yeah,
and like as more tools come online, like there'll be more and more ways to model and make things.
Yeah. All right. Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you guys so much for coming on, and thank everyone for who's watching today. We couldn't do this without you. I'm super stoked that you guys are having a great time too. Is there any last words from you guys before I pull the plug officially?
Thanks for having us.
I'm just joshing you guys. All right. Well, it's a pleasure. We will catch you next time. This is the only Modeler Monday for this month because we are prepping for Adobe Max, which is coming up in October. We will post lots
Make it last, everyone.
Make it last. Yeah, this will be your last little bit. You're more than welcome to watch this over and over again. We will not complain about it. And then hopefully we can get David on for a Modeler Monday live stream sometime in the future too. And then you guys can get your ducks.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And then we can also have Nick then heckle David. It'll be good.
Just leave Nick out of it.
All right, y'all. Pleasure.
All right.
Have a great one.